I put together something 2 years ago, and it's been on standby for 2 years. And I thought I was going to preach out of Matthew this morning, and I saw my notes in the back of my Bible on this American Minute, and I thought, this is a good time today if no one comes in. So I'm going to do something a little different this morning. This would really go well with November, but November's coming up. It's going to be here before we know it, right? The events that we're going to talk about here are American events that happened in November. So when we get to November, you might think about some of these things. But before we do this, if you will turn in your Bibles just briefly to Psalms 33, and I want to begin with a verse before we share these things from our history, our American history here. I want to begin with this verse because this verse, I think, the first part of this verse says a lot. In Psalms 33, verse 10, the Lord bringeth the counsel of the heathen to naught. Let's say that together. The Lord bringeth the counsel of the heathen to naught. Now, what we're going to talk about today is the counsel of the heathen. We all know that America was set up to be a Christian nation, right? A godly country. And the Lord bringeth the counsel of the heathen to naught. What has happened is we've got a lot of heathen ideas that have made their way into our country, right? And it actually prevails. That's the prevailing sentiment of the nation today, is heathen ideas. Oh, no, wait a minute. Heathen ideas are the prevailing sentiment of much of the church. So we watched a movie last night on Angel Studios, I think it was. It was supposed to be a Christian movie. And I told Renee as we were watching, I said, I think this is either Catholic or Lutheran. I don't know which one it is, but it's not biblical. Okay? Usually you get left-wing ideas from those areas. Some good people go to some of those churches, but the work that comes from there is typically moving people toward left-wing ideas. And they had a good idea, and the good idea was that this guy was running for state rep here in Illinois, by the way. In central Illinois was where this was set, this narrative, this fiction in this movie. And the good idea was to get people to think about what we can do, pull together and do. Well, what they did was the guy that was running for the state rep, he was quoting scriptures, and he was pointing out that there were things that God considered sinful and that the country should not be pursuing. Well, the church took it upon itself to run against this guy and to point out that this guy was just bad. He's just bad news. Because he was saying what the Bible is telling us. Well, I stand before you today and I tell you that our country does well when we abide by the Word of God, right? When we go by the Bible. So, I came across this a couple of years ago. There is this thing called American Minute with William Federer. Now, how many of you guys are familiar with the American Minute? Anybody familiar with William Federer? Yeah, okay. So, William Federer, actually, he was one of the speakers when we went to the Charlie Kirk Pastors Conference 3 years ago in Nashville. And you might have seen his book. He's got a really thick book called America's God and Country. And if you want to know anything about what anybody has said that is biblical or Christian in our country, you can go to that big, thick encyclopedia book that he put together, and he's got all the quotes in there. Okay? And he is an expert on the country and Christianity, America and Christianity. So anyway, I take some things here from this episode was aired on August 2nd, 2023. It was called John F. Kennedy Shot. Did he and others warn of a deep state? And I put this little, and a socialist threat to America. Okay? Did they warn of a deep state and a socialist threat to America? Well, that would be the heathen, right? Okay? And remember, what did that verse tell us? That, I already moved from it, that the Lord bringeth the counsel of the heathen to naught. Now, he does that. Does he do that all the time in the Soviet Union? No, be a Soviet Union. Russia? No. Because are they even seeking God?
No.
Is he doing it all the time for the people of England? No, England has turned their back on God. They are walking away from God right now. He does this. In fact, it says in the next verse or two, after that in Psalms 33, about 12 I think it is, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. So America has been blessed because God is our Lord, right? So if we are walking with God, we will be as wise as serpents, but as harmless as doves. We will speak truth and we will know things that's happening. So this is something that a lot of people say, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. Well, William Federer, he is an expert. Evidently, he doesn't think so. And he's going to tell us about what John F. Kennedy said. He's not going to think so. We're going to see what Eisenhower said. He's not going to think so. There were people who told us that there were insidious operatives in the U.S. who wanted to bring communism. And by the way, what does our media tell us all the time right now about back in the 1950s? What type of hearings did they have? The McCarthy hearings. Yeah, it didn't take you long to get that out. Because we're told all the time, oh, McCarthyism. They had McCarthy hearings. And they were always looking for certain people that might have been communists. Well, they were. Lucille Ball was a communist. She had ties to the Communist Party. And here she was, and we like to watch I Love Lucy, right? I mean, people don't even know. It's part of our history, and it's like, it doesn't mean anything to me. Well, these people have been at work for a long time in our country, and we need to know what's going on. Oh, that's my little disclaimer there. I guess I put it too small, didn't I? My disclaimer says 100% of the quotes and pictures are from American Minute with Bill Federer. In other words, I got my PowerPoints from him, okay? But not all of the above is included. In other words, I didn't include everything that was in his PowerPoints, and plus I made some other stuff. And I don't remember, this has been 2 years ago, so I'm going to have to wade through this because I don't remember how this all goes together. So here we go. We're going to start with the very beginning. And we all know this famous scene in America, right? Hey, when did this happen?
63.
63. You want to remember the month? November. There you go. November what?
22nd.
22nd. Yeah, so we're 1 month away from this, and there's our President of the United States with his sweet wife in the city of Dallas. All right, so a little bit of history here. He was visiting the home of Vice President Lyndon Baines Johnson, and of course we know what happened, which was he was shot. He was the youngest president ever elected at the age of 43. He was also the youngest president to ever die at the age of
44? 5? Same age.
43.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he'd only been in office 1,000 days. Okay, so yeah,
I can't be.
he was. Okay, yeah, he would have been what? 3 years? About 3 years later, so 46 or so, close to that. All right, so John F. Kennedy, in a Thanksgiving proclamation on October 21st of 61, said this. The Pilgrims, were they believers? They came here to make this a what? Christian nation. And they set up a foundation for our Christian nation. That's why I love in Thanksgiving to preach about the Pilgrims, okay? in November, the month of November. So it's not November, but that's all right. It's close enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
The pilgrims, after a year of hardship and peril, humbly and reverently set aside a special day upon which to give thanks to God. That's our president telling our nation this on October 28th of 61. I asked the head of each family to recount to his children the story of the first New England Thanksgiving. Can you imagine a president today asking all of the fathers of America to sit down with their children and to go over the story of the first New England Thanksgiving, to review that history in the home? Now, today, people would say, the first what? And New England? What's New England? Oh, yeah, okay, that was a part of our country at the beginning. Because you say New England to some people, and they think you're talking about across the big pond, right? So we're just so, I hate to say the word ignorant, but we're just so ignorant of these things today. And back there, fathers just sat down, and the President of the United States said to fathers, sit down and talk to this. To your children, thus to impress upon future generations the heritage of this nation born in toil. Now, by the way, let me just ask you, if this nation was born in toil, is it going to be kept without toil? No. But do we have people today who want toil?
Not many.
I mean, talking about the type of toil that brings productive things, like hard work and... No, we don't want toil, do we? Okay? This nation was born in toil, in danger, and in purpose. It had purpose. So we have to have purpose, don't we? Purpose is a big part of life. And do you think our country has kind of lost some of its purpose? I wonder who can help our nation get that purpose back. Do you think you and I have a part to play in it? We're small. We're just one person. You're just one person. But you talk to people, you network with people. And if you talk these things, talk about the Lord, talk about the history of the country, talk about how great things are, will that help other people to begin to talk about those things too?
Should.
Because right now, it seems like everybody's just kind of quiet about things. Just be quiet. Go about living your life every day. So guess what everybody else is doing? Being quiet and going about living their lives every day. We need people that will talk these things up. Here's what John F. Kennedy also said. And in conviction of that right and justice and freedom, that right and justice and freedom can, through man's efforts, persevere and come to fruition with the blessing of God. Now, what's noteworthy in that? Do people want justice today? Yeah, they say. A lot of people say they want justice. Now, it depends on how you define justice. But justice, I think there is a concept which we need to go with, which is the Bible's concept of justice. And the Bible's concept of justice is blind justice. That you don't look at color of skin or gender or any of this stuff. It's just blind justice. Okay? And it's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. If you do wrong, you're going to pay for what you did wrong. And the only way out of that is this thing that begins with an M.
Martyrdom.
Mercy. Yes. Mercy. And so this justice is out there. And freedom, do we want freedom?
Sure.
But we have to have the right definition of freedom. And is freedom just being able to do anything you want to do? No, it's not. Freedom is being able to do what God has set for us to do. The boundaries that God has set. Someone who is infinitely loving and wise, who is beyond us, who can tell us that here's the way, walk in this way. Okay? So freedom is basically serving God instead of the devil. Okay? And but none of this can happen in a nation if you don't include whom, according to John F. Kennedy's quote there. So even Kennedy said it. You have to include God. If you're going to have the blessings, you have to have God in it. So he was on his way to the Dallas Trade Mart to deliver a speech in which he had prepared to say this. This is what Kennedy now was, the picture you saw a while ago. He was going to Dallas and he was going to give a speech. Here's a speech that he didn't get to give. Okay? We in this country, in this generation, are, by destiny rather than choice, the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. This is America. Do you know that people in churches in other countries are praying for the Christians in America because they know that everything hinges on us, right? Everything hinges on us. We have been the blessing to everybody in the world. Every nation in the world that is blessed because of the United States. We have been the blesser of the whole world. And how have we been that? Because we walked with God. And we had a missionary mindset to give them truth and to help people. So America has been a great country. They are praying for us because they know that we are under attack here in the United States. Right? We are the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. And this was going to be in his speech there in Dallas that day. Ezekiel 33:7, which says, if the watchmen see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. What does that mean to you?
Warn people.
Yeah, if you don't warn people, then you have their blood on your hands. I mean, that's what God tells us, right? I'd love to, let me just say this again. I'd love to just kind of sit on my hill and do my own thing and not be involved in anything. And if I did come off of my hill, it would be to go to Dairy Queen. You know? It would be to go to Aldi and get some food. Okay? Or do the things that I want to do. But we're the watchmen on the wall. So when we come off our hill, we go out and we speak, right? And that's what we're going to do this week. O Son of Man, I set thee a watchman upon the house of Israel. Therefore, warn them. Warn them. God wants us to warn. Now, be nice in how you warn, because the goal is to win the souls, to win the people. Okay? I was a little frustrated recently. I was telling Renee, I said, I've said this, and it seems like that this is not being gotten. This wasn't around here, by the way. This is somewhere else. I've said this, and it seems like there's some resistance right there, and I'm not getting anywhere. And she reminded me what Charlie always said, which was, you're not talking to that person, you're talking to everybody that's listening. Okay? So go out and warn and talk and be nice, and you might not win the person that you're in a dialogue with, but there are others that's going to be listening, and God will use you to reach people. When I say to the wicked, O wicked man, thou shalt surely die, if thou dost not speak to warn the wicked from his way, that wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at your hand. Why? Because you didn't warn him. You didn't warn him. It required your. It'd be like if you go by a house and the house is on fire and it's very obvious that you can run in there and get the babies in that house out, and you don't do it. And later on, this comes up and people realize that you were there and you had the ability to run just right there the fire wasn't even in this part of the house. The fire was back there. But you knew there were babies here and you didn't even do anything to get the babies out. Guess what people are going to say? That baby's dead, or those babies are dead because of you. You didn't do anything. That's what God's put on us. Boy, I'd love to be an ambassador for Christ, wouldn't you? Oh, we are, aren't we? And this is a part of the responsibility we have. Now, in the New Testament, it's called ambassador for Christ. Right? So we are ambassadors, and we're telling people. Nevertheless, if thou warn the wicked, thou hast delivered thy soul. But if the wicked turn from his wickedness and do that which is lawful and right, he shall live thereby. In other words, you did your job. You warned them. Nothing new there, right? But I just read that because Kennedy was going to quote that. This president of the United States was going to quote that to Americans. And I think it is probably more pertinent today for us Americans than it probably was back then. He was also going to say this. This is part of his speech that we have the text of that he never delivered. We ask, therefore, that we may be worthy of our power and your power and responsibility, that we may exercise our strength and wisdom and restraint, and that we may achieve in our time and for all time the ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill toward men, from Luke 2:14. That's our goal. Now we know we're not going to accomplish that except for whom working through us? God working through us. So again, as we go out this week, let's ask God to work through us. That must always be our goal. And the righteousness of our cause must always underlie our strength. Now, what does that last part mean? Do you ever get tired and weary sometimes when you're trying to do right? And people are not having any part of it. They'll have none of it. And you're thinking, man, I'm just trying. I'm trying to do right. I'm trying to help you. Again, the watchman on the wall. I'm trying to help you. You say you're having all these issues. And I'm trying to help you. I know I've heard Daniel talk at times about going out and talking to people. And it's like they'll make comments. And it's like Daniel's been telling them. I know because we kind of discuss some of these things. He tells me some of the things he quotes. I know all of us do this. We go out and we quote things to people, and sometimes they don't quite seem to get it. And yet we've been telling them all along, and they're not. Well, what gives us the strength to keep on? It is right there, the righteousness of our cause. That's our strength. We are doing what is right. We are doing what God has called us to do. Now, I didn't say that, and the Bible didn't say that, but John F. Kennedy said that. And he's right. He's right. There is a righteousness in what we are doing. So sometimes let that righteousness of your cause be the strength that keeps you going. When you just feel like, man, I just want to throw up my hands and give up. I want to quit. I'm just frustrated with this situation. You've got a righteous cause, and guess what? One of these days you're going to stand before a righteous judge, right? And you'll get a reward. Now, on with John F. Kennedy. For as was written long ago from Psalms 127:1, except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. And the first part of that, except the Lord build the house. Okay, God's got to build the house. And once it's built, and by the way, America's built, right? God built the house of America. Now, we are the ones, and the other part of this verse, that are keeping the city. What has been delivered to us. That's our righteous cause, is to keep the city and to keep America godly. So that means that when someone comes along and the school board, local school board, is saying that we are not going to allow any type of religious stuff, but we're going to allow things that we all know are clearly wrong. We've seen a lot of that, right? That means that we show up. And we say, no, wait a minute here. Because we are the what? We're the watchmen on the wall. That means that we show up. And if they won't listen to us, then that means that we pray about doing what? Running for the school board. Right? This is what made America. This is what built the city. Well, guess what's going to keep the city? It's a continuation of our participation. Right? That's what we've lost in America. We've lost it in our churches, we've lost it in our homes, and maybe not everybody here has, but overall we have in this country, and we've got to get back to it. So that the men are sitting with their children at Thanksgiving, teaching them history lessons about the Pilgrims. And when the school board's doing something wrong, we're going to stand up, we're going to say, hey, that's why I ran for county board. It's just to pave a way, and say, because everyone says, the last person that should ever run is a pastor. And I'm telling you, that is the wrong thinking. What built the country was pastors that went to the front and took the bull by the horn and said, here's the path that we're going to go in. And we need at least the pews involved in that right now with everything in our culture. Okay, and then John F. Kennedy addressed the American Newspaper Publishers Association at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York, April 27th, 1961, 10 years to the day before my paternal grandfather passed away. And he said this: "The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society." Okay? Secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. In other words, do you remember what the Bible says? That this thing was not done in a corner, but it's open for all. Okay? So in other words, JFK was not much on what he's saying here. He seems to be pushing against secret societies. He did not want people in the background just maneuvering things. Now, this is where politics is today. This is why people don't like politics, but that's why we need to be involved in it, so that we push back against it. It doesn't need to be a group of people over here in a corner somewhere that's moving things. We need to be free and open, right? Free and open. He says, "And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings." Wow. I can think of some organizations that's how they operate, right? Yeah. But that was the President of the United States. And most of us here remember him when he was president. And he was saying that. And then I remember where just 20 years after that, if you preached against secret societies in the churches, you were in trouble. It's like, how dare you speak about these things? He says, we are opposed. By the way, so he was thinking there were some secret societies that was pulling some things off. He says, we are opposed around the world by a ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means or hidden means for expanding its sphere of influence. So hiding what they're doing against secret societies, hiding things. And that's how they expand their sphere of influence. And listen to this, the third line, on infiltration instead of invasion. So are we worried about people invading us in the United States right now? No. Are we worried about infiltration? Well, most people aren't, but we should be, because we probably have been infiltrated. That's what's been happening all this time. We were thinking, we got the strongest army in the world. Nobody's ever going to take us. And all the meantime, the Trojan horses were being brought into the city and set in place. On subversion instead of elections. That's interesting. Subversions instead of elections. And I wonder if you can subvert people by controlling how they think, so that you can control elections by controlling how people think. Oh, could that actually happen? I remember a time the media just reported facts and you made up your own mind. I think there's a lot of media that's subversive forces now, subverting people. So you have to be careful. You can't just turn on the TV and just listen to something. On intimidation instead of free choice. Oh, this is how communism always works, guys. You're free to do whatever you want to. We're not going to tell you can't do that you can't go to church. But if you do go to church, you can't get a job. Things are going to be stacked against you. Okay? That's intimidation instead of free choice. Now, aren't you glad that America's not built on that type of thing? But communism is. And we're just about to elect our first communist as a mayor of a large American city. Actually is considered probably the most renowned city of the world. Right? And by the way, a lot of what that man does is subversion. Because he says one thing when he means something else, and that's what the devil always does. We know this stuff, so we're the ones that have to be the watchmen and call it out. on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. Okay, so don't worry about the armies. We're not going to be taken. But the guerrillas at night. And that's what we're seeing in our cities right now. The guerrillas at night, except they're guerrillas by day. It's guerrilla warfare. It's guerrilla warfare for you younger people that might not know. That means you get a group of people and they don't have tanks and guns, but they go out and they have their little groups of people that maybe they use their voices and shout to try. Maybe they burn things down if they don't get their way. Maybe they just take things and throw them through store windows. And, all the stuff we've been seeing for the last 5 years is guerrilla warfare. And all the time we are told, oh, it's just some people that's expressing some free speech. Then other people went to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, and they just simply marched from one place to another. And they were thrown in jail for years. John F. Kennedy says it is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Wow, what a mouthful that is. Kennedy was warning us of a system that would become so highly efficient, and it would work where? In the open? No, in the background, right? Secret societies. It would work in the background. It would be tightly knit and efficient, and it would be a machine. And look at all the things that would combine. Military. Kind of makes you think of Pentagon, right? Diplomatic. Kind of makes you think of the State Department. Intelligence makes you think of CIA. Economic. Treasury. Scientific and political operations. All of them. Scientific, climate change, and, all that stuff. Without a lot of the scientific evidence. And if you question it, then you're just a science denier. Can't question anything. And by the way, if there is global warming because of our emissions, then I think we need to look at it. But you got to prove it to me first. And I hope you feel the same way. And political operations. Kennedy warned about all this. And you know what? They couldn't do it openly, so they worked in secret for decades. For decades in our country. In secret. Its preparations are concealed but not published. So they don't publish what they're doing. Again, they keep it secret. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Have you ever noticed that in the news? That people can make mistakes and it's not reported in the news? You find out about it 6 months later. Probably because you have social media. Oh, social media, it's full of a bunch of baloney, and it is. It is. But you can also find truth there, too, that you can't find in other places. How do you know the difference? Well, I'm not telling you life is easy. I'm telling you we're in a warfare, right? It's the sinners are silenced, not praised. So the ones that make the mistakes hide it, and the ones who try to point out the truth are silenced. So this tells us that the one that's behind the effort is the devil, right? Because this is how he works. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. And we're kind of at that point now where people don't care about expenditure. I sit with 13 people on a county board, and we're all supposedly together on our platform on that we want efficient government, low taxes. I see things constantly come through, and no one, it's just like, yep, okay, rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp. Oh, we got money from the state for that, rubber stamp. We got a grant for this, rubber stamp. Just rubber stamp everything. Don't question anything. Just be a rubber stamper. I think God wants us to question things. We don't have to be mean about it, but we should at least question things, right? Jesus did. Everywhere he went, he questioned. New York Times published a telling article on April 25th of 1966, and this is 60 years ago. CIA, maker of policy or tool. This is the New York Times. The New York Times, who is now probably controlled by the CIA. Okay? But this is what they said way back there. They asked the question, is our CIA a maker of policy or a tool? And here's the quote from this article. Was this secret body, which was known to have overthrown governments and installed others, really? You're not supposed to say that now. You can never say that the CIA has overthrown governments. The New York Times will call you out if you say that. And the mainstream media will call you out if you say that. But yet, the New York Times 60 years ago was writing it themselves. They were questioning it. This CIA, known to overthrow governments and installed others, raised armies, staged an invasion of Cuba, spied and counter-spied, established airlines, radio stations, and schools, supported books, magazines, and businesses, running out of control of its supposed political master. So the CIA, just out of control and trying to control us through books and magazines, media. 60 years ago. Guys, I'm just telling you, I'm quoting from the people here, or actually William Federer is. Did it lie to or influence the political leaders of the United States to such an extent that it really was an invisible government, more powerful than even the president? 60 years ago, they were questioning if the CIA was more powerful than the president of the United States. Kind of sounds like deep state, doesn't it? New York Times, in this article, former President Truman, whose administration established the CIA in 1947, said in 1963 that by then he saw, quote, something about the way the CIA has been functioning that is casting a shadow over our historic positions, and I feel that we need to correct it. Okay, so President Truman in 47 created the CIA. 15 years later, he's saying, hey, they're out of control, right? He's saying there's something about the CIA here that's not right. It needs to be corrected, because if it's not corrected, the things that we believe in are going to be taken from us, right? Casting a shadow over our historic positions. That's the things that we believe in as patriotic Americans. And President Kennedy, as the enormity of the Bay of Pigs disaster came home to him, said to one of the highest officials of his administration that he, quote, wanted to splinter the CIA in 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. Now that right there, my friend, is the beginnings of what some call a conspiracy theory. Right? What's the conspiracy theory? Everyone says it's a conspiracy theory that came from that right there. That the CIA assassinated Kennedy. But yet, who was the one that just said that? Kennedy. And did he give the CIA possibly a reason to assassinate him? Because he was wanting to abolish the CIA. He was just saying what Truman had said in 63, 3 years earlier than this. Truman was questioning the CIA. Now, I'm not telling you today the CIA is bad. I'm just telling you that we need God to be our leader, because there's a lot of dark things going on in the world. And if God's not our leader, we're sitting ducks, right? America needs God. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. How about this? 3 days before Kennedy was inaugurated, Eisenhower gave his final address. And what did Eisenhower say when he left office? Quote, we face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method, of indefinite duration, whether foreign or domestic. There is a recurring temptation to feel that some spectacular and costly action could become the miraculous solution to all current difficulties. In other words, somebody could come along and just say, hey, here's the cure. And do we like quick cures?
Yeah.
Especially if it don't cost us anything, right? If we don't have any skin in the game, someone just come along and say, here's the answer. I mean, is America ripe for that today? Yeah. Development of unrealistic programs to cure every ill in agriculture. A dramatic expansion in basic and applied research suggested as the only way to the road we wish to travel. Eisenhower was warning that someone could come along and just dangle an easy solution and everybody would fall for it. Let's go on. But each proposal must be weighed in the light of the need to maintain balance. What type of balance? Between the private and the public economy. Right now, in the last few decades, what's the only thing that really matters to us between the private or the public? Which one? Our local businesses or government? Where do we look for our answers? It's government. We look to the government for answers for everything. But he was saying we need balance between private, that's our local businesses that we own, and the public economy, which is the government. Balance between our essential requirements as a nation and the duties imposed by the nation upon the individual. In other words, the government only needs to step forward and do things inasmuch as it doesn't limit the freedom of the individual. Again, in the same but threats, new and kinder degree, constantly arise. Our arms must be mighty, ready for instant action, so that no potential aggressor may be tempted to risk his own destruction. But now, we have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Military, industrial complex. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual. See, I feel really bad preaching this day. It's kind of hard for me to preach this because the church has never addressed this type of stuff. But on the other side of the aisle, over on the secular side of the aisle, we've had people 50, 60 years ago telling us that what we were addressing was spiritual. Spiritual. So if it's spiritual, who should be at the forefront of it? The church. At least talk about it some. Keep people's eyes wide open and keep people praying about it. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. And we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. And this is why, guys, it is so hard to change things at different levels in our government today because it's become this big bureaucracy up above us. And it's hard to steer the ship. And how did this happen? It did happen over the last few decades. Pretty well our lifetime is when it did happen. When Robert came into this world, we did not have this. Okay? It has happened in our lifetime. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved, so it is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Well, there's that term, right? And by the way, guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence. Do you think that our government is trying to accumulate some unwarranted influence on our children lately? That's unwarranted influence. When we were preaching against Senate Bill 18 about 3 years ago here, when the state of Illinois was trying the sex ed stuff out of Springfield, that was unwarranted influence. And I tried to make a stand. And again, I feel a little sheepish because I know I've lived a whole lifetime of where separation of church and state. But that's not how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be at the forefront. But he warned about a military-industrial complex. There it is. Eisenhower said it. A military-industrial complex, which means the military of the United States and the economic powerhouse of the economic policies of the country, as someone said, Treasury a while ago, all of this stuff pulled together can be used against the freedoms of we the people, and we lose our constitutional rights. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. Misplaced power. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Did you hear that? We should never let it happen. Eisenhower said, as Kennedy was coming in, we should never let this happen. We are the ones that have to stand. We'll stand before God someday, and hopefully we will say, Lord, I did what I could. I spoke. I talked to people about things. People accuse me of being a conspiracy theorist. People accuse me of being too old-fashioned. People accuse me of being outdated. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. Now you see again, if we just come to church and as we just preach all the time, Jesus saves, and we never talk about what does it mean to be a Christian in a dark world. How do you do that? Okay? We will not be knowledgeable. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm just going to go out on a limb and say it. If you listen to MSNBC every day, you're not only not going to be knowledgeable, you're going to be messed up. Big time. Because those people are lying to people to their face. And they are trying to create the unrest. They are the agitators in our country. And we can't have that. Seek news sources where they give you the facts, and then you can put some pieces together stuff without them getting on there and just railing and trying to stir up your emotions in what they are saying. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals so that security and liberty may prosper together. In other words, he's saying that it takes people who know things to keep the big machinery, the industrial military complex, from taking over. Because we're going to force them to work within the machinations of our Constitution, which is individual liberty. We're not going to let them take our liberties away from us. Eisenhower warned of the tech industry. He said it's, quote, akin to sweeping changes in our industrial military posture has been the technological revolution during recent decades. In this revolution, research has become central. It also becomes more formalized, complex, and costly. A steadily increasing share is conducted for, by, and at the direction of the federal government. By the way, did we even have computers when he was saying that? I mean, in our homes? In our businesses, our local business? No. There were a few mainframes, and by that point, they were producing the mini computer, which meant small, but it was about the size of a desk. Okay? I'm not talking about the screen and the mouse. They didn't have mice then, but just you had something about the size of a desk, and it was filled with tubes, wires. They had wires in them, and that was your computing mechanism. And they actually became a mini computer because they had started using some microchips at that point. They had discovered microchips. So we didn't have all the computerized stuff. Now wait a minute. He said that this technological stuff that's like with computers and stuff is going to be conducted more and more by the federal government. And guess where we are now? You know, I don't know why I'm holding this paper. I've never looked at it. Guess where we are now? We're at a point now where we realize that AI is an enemy that can overcome us. And it's like we want to eliminate it, a lot of us. We want nothing to do with it. But then we realize, but there's China, and they're going to have it. And there's those other countries, and they're going to have it. And they're going to certainly use it against us. So what do we have to do? I mean, this is the thinking of people. Well, we've got to do something with AI. And guess what this says? We're in a situation where our government will do it and is doing it. And the very thing that Eisenhower warned about is happening. All of this technology is centralized in the government. Oh, it's our government. But can our government be rogue and bad? It sure can. We're just in a bad spot, so guess what we need? God. Today, the solitary inventor tinkering in his shop has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In other words, nothing's done in the private industry anymore. It's all done by the federal government. Our country was great because private industry researched and found answers. But now, there's no money for private to do it because everyone just expects that who's going to do it? The government's going to do it for us. He says, in the same fashion, the free university has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research, partly because of the huge costs involved, and government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity. In other words, we don't research, again, ourselves. Wasn't George Washington Carver that looked for ways to use the peanut and the sweet potato? We don't do things ourselves anymore. Renee's grandfather wasn't like an inventor. That guy could come up with all types of stuff with gadgets. He'd just make gadgets and solve things. But nobody does stuff like that anymore. Because who's doing it? The government. And here he's talking about it being at the university. So the government gives the money to the universities, and that's where it's all going to be. For every old blackboard, there are now hundreds of new electronic computers. The prospect of domination of the nation's scholars by federal employment, project allocations, and the power of money is ever present and is gravely to be regarded. And we must also be alert to the danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite. He concluded, it is the task of statesmanship to balance new and old within the principles of our democratic system, ever aiming toward the supreme goals of our free society. In other words, all this stuff, he's saying all this stuff is happening, and we need to be protecting our democracy, our Constitution, our rights, our liberties. You and I and our government must avoid the impulse to live only for today. Live only for today? Plundering for our own ease and convenience the precious resources of tomorrow. And guys, you cannot say that you abide by that and have a $37 trillion national debt that is tomorrow's bill to pay. Where we didn't pay as we went. We just borrowed from the kids, borrowed from the future. We cannot mortgage the material assets of our grandchildren without risking the loss also of their political and spiritual heritage. We want democracy to survive for all generations to come, not to become the insolvent phantom of tomorrow. It's where we are. And much of the church just doesn't care. This world of ours, ever growing smaller, must avoid becoming a community of dreadful fear and hate, and be instead a proud confederation of mutual trust and respect. You and I, my fellow citizens, need to be strong in our faith that all nations under God will reach the goal of peace and justice. But it's all how? Under God. That's about halfway through this. Let's stop there and let's pray. We want God to use us, right? I don't want to stand before God and just say, God, I just had a good time down there. I went to church when it was convenient, when I wanted to. I spoke up whenever I wanted to. Whenever the nation was having issues, I tried to be a peacemaker, Lord. I tried to just keep my mouth shut. No, we don't want to stand before God that way. We want to stand before God and say, God, you gave us a precious gem. When you gave us the church, when you gave us the family, when you gave us our country, these are such blessings. These were your blessings, God. And I tried. And ultimately, Lord, they all belong to you. I did what you called me to do. And I'm content with that. And he's going to say, well done, good and faithful servant, right? Because you did what you could do. Now someone says, I can't do much. Yes, you can. All of us put together, we have a great voice with all of us speaking out. But we also need to have a knowledge of the world that we live in. Now we've been preaching that the Antichrist is coming. And we've been preaching the kingdom belongs to Jesus. We know that the Antichrist will come before Jesus comes. And we see where all this is headed. So I don't know about you, but I pray for strength. I pray that God will make me strong. That if I live through some of these times, that I will be strong enough to stand up. And that I will not give in to my baser desires for comfort and pleasure. Because that's where I have lived my life. It's those baser desires of comfort and pleasure. By and large, because of all the great blessings that we've had, right? So we want to just take some time today. Thanksgiving is coming up, and we're going to be thankful for all the blessings that God has given us. But we want to do a little more than just thanking God next month for our blessings. We want to talk to God about what He's given to us and say, Lord, thank you for what you've given to us, and talk to Him about what's my part in this. What's my part in this? Is it talking to a neighbor? Is it writing articles? Used to be for the paper. Now it might be just doing Facebook posts. Someone says, oh, I'll get in trouble. I'll create drama. Well, what's the option? Other option is just for our voice to be muffled. And that's exactly what these great presidents of ours from both sides of the aisle, most of them were primarily from one side there. Do you notice? Truman, Kennedy. Well, we had Eisenhower in there in between them. But from both sides of the aisle, we're basically saying, we've been given something beautiful. And it's up to us to retain it.